This is the location on the clubhouse ground floor terrace where we had breakfast served every morning during the workouts of the horses, starting around 6:30 a.m. and going through until about 9 o'clock when the horses left the track. And it was very popular with many people, but especially with children. Parents like bringing their children here, and you could have a full breakfast or just a snack or whatever. It was a nice feature. In my hand here, an interesting book that was done by a racing writer who was an admirer of Hialeah, John Crittenden. He wrote this book in 1989, and it's quite an all-inclusive book. I'm turning to a page on the architecture of Hialeah. As I think I may have said earlier in this interview, Hialeah was patterned after the French chateau style of architecture, which was Longchamp and Chantilly in Paris and France. And an interesting side comment I have on that is that after we had completed all of our improvements here, which we tried to keep in the style of the French chateau with our architect, Mr. Geiser, a few years after it was completed, they were redoing Longchamp. They were doing a building program, and the Longchamp architects came to Hialeah to study our architecture, and we spent a couple of days with them, going all through the property, and they took many photographs. And when I went back to Longchamp years later, I could see some of the features of Hialeah there. Also in this book, I see a number of, there's so much in here, but I'll just point out a picture of my father here. I think there's a larger picture, but I don't know exactly where it is. We had bought some antique carriages in England, in Oxford. There was a man who ran a stagecoach from Oxford out to Windsor Castle, and he had a collection of old English carriages. So I went over there and bought 3 or 4 of them and brought them back, and we had them on display here. This was one of the carriages, and there's my father next to the driver. Here's a picture of Hialeah with the same scene as the painting that we talked about a few minutes ago, with all the people there. Famous names. This was the famous movie director, Gene Markey, who was then married to the widow of the owner of Calumet Farm. Markey was also famous because he had married 3 beautiful actresses. One was Joan Bennett, another was, I can't remember, there were 2 others, Joan Bennett. Anyway, there were 3 of the most beautiful actresses in Hollywood who he married. And there's a picture of me as a young man again, taken probably around 1957 or 8. Oh, to be young again. Famous horse trainer, Jimmy Fitzsimmons, one of the most famous trainers ever. This is a picture of John Galbraith, who put together a group that bought Hialeah from us when we decided to sell. He and his group kept it for about 4 or 5 years. And then they sold it to John Brunetti, who has been the owner for the last probably 30 years, and kept it open for a large number of those years. But unfortunately, racing, not only locally here but also nationwide, has been in decline since the early 70s. Partly due to the advent of other sports. When we were at Hialeah, there was no other sport here. Hialeah was the only game. And the season was defined by the Hialeah season. We opened around January 17th and closed in early March, and that was the height of the fashionable season in Miami. Following that time, gambling came in, the Florida lottery, gambling, and all the other sports came into Miami, the Miami Dolphins, the basketball team, the hockey team, and competition was there that it had never been before. And nationwide, sadly, racing has also been in decline. Young people today just don't seem to be into horse racing. They're into NASCAR racing and other sports, and it's just been a rather precipitous decline over the last 30 or 40 years, all of which contributed to the end of racing in Hialeah.